Welcome to the Journey 2020. I'm Charles Morris. Happy that you're joining us here on this Monday evening, where we come to you every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here at www.thejourney2020.com. We've been around since 2013. Happy to be here with you. And today's show, a week or so ago, the Democratic Black Caucus was in town for a conference, and I had a chance to go out and videotape most of the events that took place. And they had a forum in which they invited 4 of the candidates that are running for governor. Now, the Black Caucus members had a session where they had opportunity to interview them privately and ask questions, and I had a chance to videotape that as well. And I had a chance to kind of get a feel for the 4 candidates from the Democratic side. And for myself, I try to look at a person's heart. That's where I start to try to get a feel for them. And all of them was very intriguing. And then afterwards, after the private interviews, they had an open forum where they talked to the guests that was there. One of the candidates had to leave, so out of the 4, there was 3 there on the panel. The forum is emceed by Stuart Moore from Channel 2 West, the NBC affiliate here in the Orlando area. He did a great job, by the way, Stuart Moore. I had a chance to meet him and talk to him. But again, I'm Charles Morris. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I guess you would consider me independent. I do work a lot with the Democrats because in my circle, I get a phone call and they ask me to come and go to work. And if I got a call from the Republicans, I doubt very seriously if I would turn work down, but I've never gotten that phone call. As I understand, this is one of the most important elections, they're saying, in the history of the United States. And I think a lot of us, we're trying to figure out where we are and how did we get here when it comes to where we are in our country today, especially when it comes to our leaders. So get a chance, take the time for those who would like to hear from the candidates, 3 of the candidates that are running for governor. They are taking questions from the audience. I thought it was important that I show it here on the Journey 2020. And for those who are watching the show, please email us if you have any show ideas. You can always like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. We're also on Twitter and Periscope. So we're all over the place. And again, this forum took place 2 weeks ago at the Rosen Center. And there are 3 candidates that are there on the panel, hosted by Stuart Moore from Channel 2, the West NBC affiliate here. And they, maybe you might get a feel for who they are and what they stand for. So let's check them out.
I want to go over a couple of quick rules just so that I can point things out, not only for the candidates, but for you sitting in the audience as well. All questions will be submitted from the audience that I've already started to receive. Some of these on the cards. I have questions of my own as well, as you might imagine. At my discretion, I'll start reaching into the cards and we'll start asking some of those questions. I've already seen a couple of them that are very similar tracks, and also similar tracks as things that I was going to bring up myself, so we're all kind of focused on the same big issues. Also, each candidate will be giving 1 minute to answer each of those questions. Each candidate will have a then 30-second rebuttal opportunity, one of the 3 on the cards that they have received just a few moments ago. The length of the forum is not to exceed past 3:30, and we know these candidates have very busy schedules and they have to continue on to campaign across the state. We are also missing another one of the candidates here today, Mr. Philip Levine, the former mayor of Miami Beach. He could not be here because of prior scheduled events, but he did send several of his surrogates, and they've been handing out some materials that you can also find in front of you as well. At the end, we're going to be able to, while we're having this discussion as well, we have some signs that are in the back. Jessica, I hate to interrupt you, but can you hold up the signs just so we can see them really quickly? We've got a 5-second sign that she's got first. Here we go. There we go. 5-second sign. That's when you need to start wrapping up your last sentence and your last thought. We've got another sign that you've got, Jessica. We've got the 30-second sign, so that kind of gets you winding up. And then the stop sign. If we get to the stop sign, I hate to cut you off. because you guys are all professionals, but we may have to cut you off. So with that said, let's start. And we got a card up here. If one of the people can, Russell, you grab that card. We're going to start off with Mr. Andrew Gillum. He'll introduce himself, and you've got a couple minutes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Stuart and Lydia and the executive committee of this important and august group. I want to thank my colleague, aspiring electeds and former electeds who are in this race together. Many of us have been on this trail for about a year. And I am exceedingly proud that we are having this conversation about public policy as it impacts communities of color particularly. And I actually think that it's an important conversation that all four of us need to participate in. And I hope that we'll get a chance to hear from Mr. Levine on some of those issues more publicly soon. But as it relates to me, I am extremely proud to greet you as the mayor of Florida's capital city, Tallahassee, Florida. And although I'm in the northern part of this state, I'm actually from the southern part of this state. I was born and raised in South Dade, area called Richmond Heights. Born to my mother, Frances, who growing up was a school bus driver, and my daddy, Charles, growing up, who was a construction worker. And when my daddy didn't have construction work to be done, you might find him on a street corner selling fruits or vegetables, or on Saturday morning across from the cemetery selling flowers to bereaved families. My mother and father did everything that they could do to create a way and a pathway for me and my siblings. I'm the first of my 7 siblings to graduate from high school and the first to graduate from college. My family knows what it means to see intergenerational poverty interrupted at the hands of a very good public education. And what we've got to do in this state is create a pathway forward, a pathway for success, that regardless of where you come from, what your mother or your father did for a profession, what side of the tracks you may live on, that you get the opportunity not only to learn, but the opportunity to excel in this state. And if you make me the Democratic nominee, you'll not only have a nominee who knows what it means to survive in the state of Florida, but you'll have a nominee who knows what it is to thrive in the state of Florida. And my experience in this state is more like the voters that we've got to turn out than anybody else running. And I look forward to delivering on the promise that I get to stand on today. I'm looking forward to today's conversation, and I thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here.
Andrew Gillum, Tallahassee Mayor. Ms. Gwen Graham.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gwen Graham, and I want to first off say thank you to Lydia and the Executive Committee and the Black Caucus for providing us this opportunity. Andrew and Chris and myself, all three of us up here would be better than any Republican ever could be for the state of Florida, right? And I never thought I was going to run for office. Many of you may know my father, Governor Senator Bob Graham, but I'll tell you what he really likes to be called is Doodle, because that's what his grandchildren call him. It's true. My mom's Deedle, by the way, Doodle and Deedle. But I never thought that I was going to run for office, but I made the decision to run in 2014 because I knew that what we needed in elected office was more people who wanted to figure out a way to bridge the divisiveness and to start getting things done. And that's why I ran in 2014, and nobody thought I was going to win. As a matter of fact, the political reporters were taking bets against me. Well, guess what? No one will bet against me now. No one will bet against me now. And when I think about why am I running for governor, it's because I'm so passionate about providing a better future for Floridians. No one can argue that the last 20 years have been disastrous for the people of Florida and for communities of color. We have had, unfortunately, 20 years where there has been a concerted attempt to privatize our public education. My commitment to public education is by the time I've been governor for 8 years, we would be back on the right path. My commitment is to making sure that we reform our criminal justice system. I'm so proud to have supported Amendment 4. I signed the petition early on. I had the petitions at all of my events, and I'm so glad that it's on the ballot this time, because we need to fight for felony restoration of rights. And what we've got to have is a governor, because we've seen too many constitutional amendments get on the ballot, and then the governor just ignores them. But as governor, I'm going to be making sure that that restoration of rights is fully implemented. And we have got to win this time. How many times have we come so close and yet have not been able to elect a Democrat governor? And the way you win in the state of Florida is by running a 67-county strategy. I'm going everywhere in the state of Florida. There's not a county that I don't believe that I can do very well in. And I'm committed to bringing together the south part of the state where I was born, proud to be born and raised in Miami, and the north part of the state where I have lived for most of my life, and bringing us together. So after I'm elected governor, we're caring about Floridians again, and we're one Florida together again, and fighting for the issues and the challenges that we all face across the state and making life better for all of us. And that's what I will do in my commitment. Thank you.
Congresswoman Britton Graham. Mr. Chris King.
Well, it's an honor to be with you today. Lydia and Russell, thank you for your leadership. It's been a privilege to get to know you over the last year. I am Chris King. I am a candidate running from Central Florida. This is my home. This is where I grew up, the youngest of three boys. And you know what drove me to ultimately do this, because like Gwen said, this was not a part of my plan. I didn't see this happening. But, you know, I grew up with a praying grandmother, and that led to a praying mother, and that just so happened to lead to a praying wife. And, you know, they taught me from an early age that those to whom much is given, much is expected. And one of my life verses was, you know, do not let anyone look down on you are young, but set an example in faith, life, love, and in purity. And what I believe is we are at a moment where we have an opportunity to do something incredibly significant in the state of Florida. The Democratic Party has lost this election so many times. We have been very good at losing, and we've not been very good at serving folks all across this state. So the last year, Andrew mentioned, we've been at this almost a year. I've had the opportunity to take some pretty significant stands. You know, I was an early voice across this state that said all Confederate monuments across the state of Florida must come down. I was someone early in this race from Little Haiti. I have a passion for Haiti. I've spent a lot of time in Haiti. From Little Haiti, on the day that the President of the United States said what he said about those from African countries and from Haiti, I was able to say, this is cruel, this is wrong, this is un-American, and this is why we need a governor to stand up to that president. My background is affordable housing. I have a passion for affordable housing. We're in a crisis all across the state of Florida. I feel like I can fix it with your help. We have 2.5 million people without health care. We have a criminal justice system that is known for mass incarceration all across the nation, and it is bad here in Florida. And I don't believe we're going to win this election if we don't have new leaders with fresh ideas that are going to be able to get it done. I look forward to serving you, and I look forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chris King, thank you. Again, they're going to get 1 minute to answer each of the following questions that we're going to have. They're going to be in no particular order, but I just want to go down the line on this one, and we'll start with Chris and then work our way this way. This should be a quick answer without a big discussion. Will you support whatever Democratic candidate wins on this side of the ballot when it comes to November?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, wholeheartedly.
No question about it, yes.
All right, now that we have the pledge on record, we can all move forward. A lot of people did have that question. I had that as one of my questions as well. I want to start with criminal justice reform. Florida has the third largest prison system in the country. The majority of that population is African-American males. Congresswoman Graham, as you're sitting here, what are the top 2 things that you would do to reform criminal justice in the state of Florida, and is a focus to reduce the number of people locked up?
Well, I think the first thing we must do is in the revolving door of the prison system by making sure that we provide that strong education foundation at the very beginning from birth forward, so that we're providing opportunities for great paying jobs and making sure that we're supporting everyone in an equitable way. I am very concerned about the move to privatizations of our prisons. It makes no sense to me that we would be encouraging our prison system to keep people in prison as opposed to rehabilitation, which is the foundation of our criminal justice system, is rehabilitation. So there are a lot of steps that must be taken. And I have seen the inequality in our criminal justice system. I have sat in courtrooms and seen when the majority of those being brought into the courtroom are African American. And we've got to get back to making sure that everyone across the state of Florida is treated fairly in our criminal justice system and every parts of our society.
Chris, same question for you. What would you do with the criminal justice system that we currently have in the state of Florida, one of the largest expenditures in our state budget?
A big, bold, progressive governor, in my view, reverses the river, reverses the pipeline. What are the big ideas that are going to do it, that are going to change the issues around mass incarceration and criminal justice reform? One big idea we've got to pass is the restoration of rights to 1.6 million Floridians across this state. If we don't do it at the ballot, we've got to have a governor that does it through the clemency process. 2, I firmly oppose the death penalty. I think it's wrong. I think it is a penalty that needs to be eliminated in the state of Florida. 3, we have got to invest in public education, K through 12, and community college and trade school in a way that we have not done. And that's why I am the candidate with a plan for free community college and trade school across the state of Florida. Because I believe that every child, every student needs a pathway of opportunity. That's how we reverse this pipeline.
Mayor Gillum?
I agree with the comments around obviously ending the school-to-prison pipeline. As governor, 1, we will outlaw all private prisons in the state of Florida. We've got to end this prison industrial complex where it is made for profit. The criminalization and the incarceration largely of communities of color. I am also in favor of the decriminalization and the legalization of marijuana, and I'll tell you why, because I know this can be sticky. Marijuana utilization is about equal among whites and blacks. However, blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested and incarcerated for the use of a plant. We have got to get our hands around this piece of public policy and make sure that we disrupt this pipeline into criminality. And then beyond that, when our people return to our communities, and I know this well, having had a brother who had to serve his time when he messed up, paid his debt to society, got out, applied for jobs, got told no, 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 and no. As mayor of the city of Tallahassee, we banned the box. We don't ask about criminal background history when you apply for a job. We measure you on your merit, on your skill, on your qualifications, and if the answer is that you can do the job, then welcome aboard.
Mayor Gillum, what do you think the biggest issues are affecting the African American community in the state of Florida?
Well, I mean, there are many. We just talked about one around the prison industrial complex. We talked about the school-to-prison pipeline. But I have to tell you, economic opportunity lies almost at the centerpiece of much of it. We know that when people are working, that they're not out committing crimes. We know that when people are able to earn a wage where they cannot have to work 2 and 3 jobs, but work 1 job to make ends meet, that they're happier, they spend more time with family, they're able to take a vacation once a year over a weekend. And in my opinion, that should not be too much to ask for in the state of Florida in this year 2018. And so we've got to deal with the challenges of economic growth, economic prosperity. And I will tell you, as a mayor, I right now lead the city of Tallahassee as its mayor, which is the fastest growing economy in the state of Florida per capita. We're the 17th fastest growing economy in the country per capita because of what we're doing to lean into these challenges. I won the tech hire designation during the Obama administration for the work that we're doing to train this generation of workers for the technology-related jobs that exist today. Stand on my experience.
You got the stop sign back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you back there.
Don't forget that she's back there. Yeah. Congresswoman Graham, similar question for you. Statewide, we have about 3.4% unemployment rate, and the African American community is estimated to be about 6.6%. How do you combat that?
It absolutely starts with providing an education system that's giving the skill sets that are necessary for the jobs that we want to be here in the future and that are here today. When I was in Congress, I sponsored a piece of legislation that would bring technical training down into the middle school years. As the mom of 3 who have survived the middle school years, I know that that is a time when you can really grab kids and get them excited about their future. And That will help with many of the other challenges we see as well. If you're involved in training for a job that you're going to be able to get in the future, you move forward, you graduate from high school, you get an AA degree or you get a higher university degree, and then you actually have an opportunity to get that great paying job that gives you that foundation where you don't have to go to work and go to one job after another job after another job. I want for Floridians to have a quality of life that comes with the foundation of that great paying job. And I want Florida in the future to be the state that you don't just talk about Amazon coming here or the next Amazon, but they want to come here because we're the best place to be.
Chris, you're a business owner. You hire and fire. You've done that for several years. Tell me, what's the key to getting the unemployment rate even better than it for African American community and the statewide as a whole?
Well, it's small business. It's entrepreneurship. It's what I call doing well by doing good. You know, I built a company from scratch. I didn't have any capital. I didn't have any track record. I didn't really have any experience, but I had a mission to try to serve a need, which was affordable housing. We pay living wages. We pay full health care. We're highly philanthropic across our state and around the world. And what I have seen is a state where if you're wealthy and well-connected, this is a great state to live. But if you're not, there can be few economic opportunities. And so what I get excited about as a governor is creating a more fair economy. How do we get access to capital to many of our urban communities who have not seen that? How do we loosen up financing to small businesses in these communities? Because that's what we want to do. We want to empower and we want to excite in a way this governor has no interest in doing.
Congresswoman, if you don't live off I-95, I-4, I-75 in parts, you know, what do you do to spur businesses in the most rural communities in the state of Florida?
Mm-hmm. You mean the parking lots that are I-75 and I-95?
Yeah.
And well, being a representative of North Florida, I represented a district that went all the way from Tallahassee on the eastern side over to Panama City on the western side. And it's critically important that we recognize that bringing broadband access to rural parts of Florida is going to be key to allowing those areas that are not as well connected to be a full part of our economic opportunities here in Florida. So also as our ports are being developed and opportunities with our ports, having an opportunity to move goods from, for instance, the port of Panama City across Florida and north into the rest of the country is going to be an economic driver as well. But certainly you touched on our infrastructure needs. The fact that this governor did not take the high-speed rail from Tampa to Orlando is absolutely unexcusable because that would have been something that would have provided more infrastructure support across the state of Florida, and then we could have built on that. And I see the big old stop in orange.
I want to stay with you really quickly, though, Congresswoman, just to point out, you know, in Tallahassee, what are the things that you would implement to really spur those businesses? You mentioned you mentioned some details, but get into it. How are you going to negotiate with what could be a Republican legislator to make sure these things happen? Well,
let's not assume it's going to be, Stuart. This year could see many, many Democrats elected, right? We're all going to do our part in this audience, right? But it's what I do well. I do well negotiating and talking with people that often disagree with me. But make no mistake about it, Stuart, my commitment to this, the people of Florida and the state of Florida is we're going to get Florida back on the right track. And in the rural parts of our state, there are great opportunities. And I don't know anybody in the audience here who's from North Florida, but we need to be taking advantage of every part of this state. And one of my commitments is to make sure that we are providing minority business support again. This governor has not been one that has supported that. And I actually have worked side by side with owners of minority businesses who have shared with me that they need support in other ways as well. They need support starting their businesses. They need support making sure that they be able to get out the information about their businesses. My commitment is going to be to help grow our economy, whether you're in North Florida or South Florida or anywhere in between.
Mr. King, if you're in Tallahassee, what are you telling fellow legislators that needs to be a priority to spur businesses in those forgotten communities?
Well, first, I would argue a very specific idea is higher education. I mean, we have got to create a pathway to trade schools and state colleges for every student. I have a program, if you're from Central Florida, as part of our company and foundation, that's at Evans High School, that's at Colonial, that's at Oak Ridge, that's at Jones High School. And this is one example. Edna. Can I just tell your story real quick? So Edna, who I just ran into the hall, was here for the Millennial Celebration. You know, she's at Evans High School. She's an incredible student, right? Because we say that talent is equally distributed, opportunity is often not. Edna is trying to now choose between a full ride at Wake Forest University, a top 25 school in the nation, and the University of Florida. And this was a program that gave her the access and the resources and the information she needed to do what she was designed, built, and able to do. Those are the types of specific things we need to do across the state of Florida. That's why I'm running for governor, to scale those type of programs.
Okay, Mr. King, thank you. I'll weigh in just saying I went to Florida State, so choose Wake Forest or Florida State.
Edna, if you go to Wake Forest, my niece goes there. I want to introduce you to her, okay? It's a great school.
Mayor Gillum, you live in Tallahassee. Mm-hmm. You get to see the dysfunction straightforward down the street. Tell us what you would do if you moved a couple of blocks down on making sure that these forgotten communities across the state of Florida are not forgotten anymore.
Yeah, so the state of Florida right now has a fund called the Florida Growth Fund. It's 1.5% of the total assets that are managed by the state of Florida through the State Board of Administration. State Board of Administration has control over $200 billion, with a B, $200 billion of assets that are Florida assets. The legislature said the Florida Growth Fund would dedicate 1.5% of that. In total, that equals about $800 million to be invested in the Florida growth businesses. When Jeb Bush came into office, he got rid of, through affirmative action, all affirmative action in state contracting and in higher education. He did that through executive order. Through executive order, we will bring that back, and we will also put a mandate on that $800 million that we will also make sure that those dollars are distributed in such a way that it reflects the diversity of this state. This is a very diverse state, one of the most diverse in the country. Yet, when it comes to getting access to those dollars, many minority companies, businesses don't get access to that capital. Through a mandate, we're going to make sure they get access and are able to then build their businesses and grow the economy.
Mayor, I want to stay with you, and I want to switch focus a little bit towards education, but it's all kind of intertwined as far as you're talking about economic development and education. If you go to, let's say, any particular school in Orange County, on the wealthier side of parts of the county, you walk into a school building, and you would think that it could be a private school because they have the top tier technology in that classroom, top tier books, but an equal school that's also in the same district may not have those same types of things. How do you fix that opportunity gap in each individual counties?
Well, I'll tell you, first we got to stop the drain under these Republicans of extracting public money away from public schools into for-profit private schools. And I will tell you that we've come up with a proposal in response to that, and we're the only candidate that has offered a way to pay for it. We have proposed a $1 billion reinvestment into this state's education system to begin with, one, making sure that all of our kids get access to a high-quality early learning experience. Over 90% of brain development that takes place over the course of human life takes place between those ages. We want to make sure that our kids start ready to learn. Second, we propose a starting salary for teachers of $50,000. Teaching used to be an honorable middle-class profession. We need to make it that again. Third, we talk about reinvesting in the school infrastructure. And fourth, we talk about reinstilling back in our high school systems the same kind of trade programs that used to exist: technical, mechanical, electrical, woodwork, shop, that gave people a skill that they could monetize, go to work, get a job, and take care of themselves and their families. We're going to bring that back, and we've got a way to pay for it.
Mr. King, same question to you in regards of how do you fix disparities between two schools that could be in the same county?
Well, I think the first challenge is that most people don't see that. Most people disagree with that statement, that there are tremendous disparities, because most of those folks that are at those affluent schools across the state of Florida aren't faced with those challenges. And so I think the challenge for a new Democratic governor is to be an advocate, an all-out advocate for public education, and to be able to raise awareness across the state. You know, I've talked about the fact that 90% of our students are in public schools, and 90% of the conversation all across Tallahassee is about everything but public education. We want to invest more. We want to attract, build, retain, and pay teachers more. And we want to bring the calling back to public schools. Because right now what teachers tell Andrew, Gwen, and I as we travel across the state of Florida is that the profession, the calling of teaching is no longer being treated that way. If we are successful at one thing at all when it comes to public education, it's going to be bringing a sense of calling back to our state's teachers.
Okay, Mr. King, thank you. Congresswoman, tell us about your plans for the education to make sure that that gap is equalized across the board so the students all get the same opportunities.
I'm running for public education. If you were going to ask me, one thing that drives me every day is to make sure that after 8 years as governor, that every child across the state of Florida is supported. And yes, one of the ways that we make sure every child is supported is to make sure that all the facilities that our children go to school in are well supported as well. My commitment is to make sure that we fulfill the promise that was made through these steps. One, we've got to end this culture of high-stakes standardized testing. It is not helping our teachers teach our kids. Two, we've got to end the grading of our schools. It is not grading, it is degrading. And that is one of the reasons why we see this disparity, because you have D and F schools that don't have the resources and A schools do. That's going to end. And we're going to make sure that we use the lottery dollars. Everybody, do you remember when the promise of the lottery dollars, that we're going to add money to education? That has not happened. When I'm governor, that's how we're going to get the resources. We're going to do what the people of Florida asked us to do, which is to use resources that the lottery provides to add money to education, not as an excuse to take money away from education.
You guys can all take a quick little 20-second break. It's funny because I got a note that says start asking some of the questions from the audience. I have been. It's all intertwined with how I'm also asking my questions. So don't fear not. Your questions are being asked from this vantage point as well. But I will ask this one directly off the card to make everyone feel better. And this will be for all the candidates. And we'll start with Mr. King on the end, and then we'll just work our way this direction. What makes you stand out from your competitors that are on stage?
Sure. Well, I think one obvious thing is I'm the only one who's not been a politician before. For me, I am running as an outsider, and I've taken the position all across the state of Florida that we need something new and different. Because what the Democratic Party has put up these last 20 years has not been successful. It's not worked. And we need big, bold, progressive ideas. I'm very comfortable running as a progressive, but I'm also very aware of how we're going to win that argument in the entrepreneurial community. You know, one of the things I was reminded of this yesterday, I was being interviewed by a very conservative journalist, and I was reminded that everything we say when we talk about investing more in this or investing more in that, they come at us in the general election and they call us tax and spend liberals. How are you going to pay for that? Where are you going to take that money? What are you going to do? They treat us as if we don't understand business, we don't understand prosperity. I believe because of my background, I'm protected against those charges and can win that debate in November.
Mayor Gillum, what makes you stand out amongst your competitors?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm the only non-millionaire running for governor, and I have to admit as well that it's not because I don't want to be one, I'm just not. I also have 15 years of public policy making experience across a range of public policy, and I actually don't think it's a bad thing to have experience in governing and policy making, of listening to communities and trying to reflect what you hear by improving public policy outcomes for all people. I believe that one of the reasons that I will be successful in November after we win this Democratic nomination is that my lived experience in this state of what it means to not just survive, but what it means to thrive in this state is more like the people who we need to turn out to vote than anybody else running. I'm different than the Congresswoman in the sense that while she was in Congress, her first year in office, she voted against President Obama's agenda 52% of the time. I don't know Chris as well. I'm getting to know him. But I do think that it matters to have some experience in this space. We've had Rick Scott with none, Donald Trump with none, and I think this state has been ill-served by it.
Congresswoman, what makes you different than your competitors?
Well, first, I want to just respond to the statement about President Obama, which is just not true. The votes that are taken are all not tallied, and I voted with the president the vast majority of the time. And I'm so proud to be President Obama's friend. As a matter of fact, the last time I saw him, it was at the White House at the end of both of our terms, and he came up to me and he said how proud he was of me. And I said, Mr. President, I am so proud of your presidency. But what makes me different is I have the right combination of both. I'm not a career politician, but I'm also someone that has had experience in Congress, which I will be able to use to the benefit of Florida. And I have won. I have beaten the Republicans in a tough year. I was one of only 2 Democrats in the entire country in 2014 to beat a sitting Republican incumbent. They spent $6 million against me, which if you take that statewide is about $60 million. And if you don't think it's not going to take someone who's been through, who's beaten the odds, who's beaten Republicans in the past, they're going to come after us. From August 29th on, they're going to be coming after us, and we have to have someone who's already proven that I can win, and we will win in November. We
got a rebuttal for our first of the day from Mayor Gillum.
Yeah, I mean, I have to put the record straight because I'm here, and we're all here to level and be honest. I have been in the White House several times, and I've spoken with the president several times, and attended a wedding just a few months ago with the president. It's not about that. It is about our records and how we have voted. And I'm accountable for 15 years of public policy making, and the Congresswoman is responsible for her 2 years in Congress. And in that record, and my source is Congressional Quarterly, which did identify in the first year of voting, the Congresswoman voted against the president on votes that were scored by the White House, where the president expressed his will 52% of the time.
Let's go back to our questions from the audience, and this one comes, and it's going to Mr. King, and then we'll work our way down with some more questions as well. Infrastructure, in the black and brown.
Can I use a rebuttal?
Okay.
Because I think I have to.
I was wondering if you were going to pull that card out.
I mean, here's the reality. First of all, Andrew, I love you.
Back to you.
I love you. We love each. Look. All 3 of us on this stage, we genuinely care about each other, and all of us are going to be better than any Republican. So let's just lay it out on the line, right? But the reality is most votes are not scored. Most votes are not. And if you look at my overall voting record, I voted a vast majority of the time with the Democratic Party, which is the president's party. So it's to pick and choose certain votes. It's just not fair, Andrew. And if we're about fairness, let's be fair.
He's going to use another rebuttal.
I'm going to say it, and then we can move on, or we can spend all of our rebuttals here.
I got 2 more. I got 2 more right here.
You may have them. All right. And really, this isn't banter. This is important. And it's important because our records matter. And it's important because in November, we're going to have to provide motivation for Democrats to turn out and vote if a Democrat is going to win in November. If we think we're going to get to the governor's mansion by getting Republican voters to overwhelmingly choose us over their own nominee, we are mistaken. And that logic has failed us for 20 years straight, 5 consecutive elections for governor. On the Keystone Pipeline, which the president weighed in on, the Congressman voted against. I'm sorry?
You're at the stop sign right now.
I'll stop on that argument, and I won't go back.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll stop on that one.
Look, Andrew and I are good friends, and this is the politics of running against each other. But the reality is that, proud of my record, I voted. Every time I voted, I had the best interests of the people of Florida at heart. You can agree to disagree and still be friends. And quite honestly, we need a lot more of that in our politics today. So, high five.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we'll move on with some more of the questions from here, and we'll go back to you, Mr. King, on the end. Infrastructure in the black and brown communities creates a challenge. What is your plan on improving issues of infrastructure? I'll give you a specific example. Look at the Paramore neighborhood, long forgotten by the city of Orlando. Next thing you know, a soccer stadium goes there, and more dollars start to go into that area as well. What would you do to improve that without having to build stadiums and force people who've been there in those communities out for many years?
Absolutely. So this really goes to the heart of my experience. You know, we talk about the fact we have a housing crisis all across the state of Florida. I'm from here, so I'm very aware of Paramore and what is happening there. And, you know, the fact of the matter is over the last 20 years, Tallahassee politicians have raided our state's trust fund, our resources for communities just like Paramore, to create the types of housing, mixed use, affordable, first-time homebuyer assistance. They've rated it to the tune of $2 billion. And I'm so proud that our campaign has made that such a prominent issue in this race that now candidates are talking about it on both sides of the aisle. I will stop that on day one, and I will be a governor that will be investing nearly $1 billion a year, $1 billion a year, directing between our trust fund and private investment into communities, underserved communities all across the state of Florida.
Mayor Gillum, I want to kind of make it specific for you in Tallahassee and the gentrification of parts of Frenchtown.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that all of us want to see reinvestment in these areas. We want to see economic growth happen. The unfortunate part is that when that economic growth begins to happen, largely the values of the land, the values of the property tend to go up. And if you're a pre-existing person in those areas and you have previously had to pay taxes on a lower valued property, it will go up. Now, I think there are some things that we can do. I think obviously funding affordable housing in this area is important. But I would also recommend we do something like similar to what we did in Tallahassee around inclusionary housing, so that when new housing comes into this area, what we have a law that says is if you build more than 50 units of housing, that at least 10% of that housing mandatorily has to be affordable housing. It's got to be set at the affordable housing rate. And I think we can scale that up around the country. It's a practical way to deal with it. Obviously, we want to get affordable housing dollars back appropriately in where they are supposed to be, but there are creative things that local and state government can do together to stave off this type of growth that makes it unaffordable for people to live.
Congresswoman, let's talk about the homestead. And a lot of Republicans in Tallahassee want to extend it, make it even larger amounts of money that you can take off. What would you do as far as homestead is concerned? And also, where is there a place where you could see yourself raising taxes?
Well, I absolutely think that what's going to be on the ballot this election should be defeated, because we're asking more and more of local governments to do more and more across our state with less and less. And it is Tallahassee not taking responsibility for making the lives of people across the state of Florida better. That's all we're talking about today. We're talking about education. We're talking about affordable housing. I don't believe we've talked about health care yet, but these are all issues of quality of life issues. And you're right, Florida is a very, very low resource state. And as a result, we have a lot of needs in this state. What we've got to do is go through our budget. A budget is an identification of your priorities. Dissect the budget and get it back where the money that's being spent, the resources that are being spent in the areas that will help people in their lives. Right now, the special interests in Tallahassee have control. They're getting huge tax breaks. They're getting huge tax credits. Those are coming to an end. And the only focus of my administration is going to be how can we spend resources to help people in their lives.
Okay, Congresswoman, thank you very much. I just got handed this by Russell Drake, and I need to read this out. The conference hashtag, if you're on social media, is DBCF 2018, hashtag DBCF 2018, and the Twitter and Instagram handle is DBC Florida. They are asking everyone to check in and help spread the word of this important discussion that we're having today. Let's switch now to the most recent tragedy that we had in our state in Parkland, Florida. And we see these tragedies play out in local communities all the time with gun violence that happens throughout the state. And I want to start with you, Mr. King. What would you do with gun reform? What are your top priorities when it comes to gun reform? And what changes would you make that you think could actually get passed in Tallahassee?
Sure. Well, first, we're in Orlando. And for me, one of the most inspiring, moving, and challenging moments in our city's history was the Pulse nightclub. Stuart did incredible coverage of that. And 49 people died at the hand of a very, very dangerous weapon. And so from the first moment of my campaign, I have made the case that we have to ban weapons of war in the state of Florida. This is hugely important. And I made the promise that if elected, if I can't do it legislatively, which would be very difficult, I will do it on the ballot in 2020 and be a governor champion. I believe in universal background checks. I believe in all of the loopholes that we must close in this debate, and I've said it consistently this entire campaign season. I believe the students of Parkland, the survivors of Pulse, want us to do something big when it comes to gun safety, and I will be a governor who will deliver on that aspiration.
Congresswoman Graham, should we expect teachers to walk around with guns ready to fire on students who come on campus with guns?
Absolutely not. That idea is absolutely without understanding of what it means to have a firearm and be expected to fire in an active shooter situation. My husband, who has been sworn law enforcement since he was 18 years of age, and I talk about this all the time, even he, who has been shooting a gun since he was 18, he said in an active shooter situation, I would be inaccurate. So planning to put guns in the hands of those who are not used to firing them and then expecting them, are we going to have shootouts in our cafeteria, Stuart? I mean, this is absolutely an insane idea, and it comes from the gun lobby. This is what they want. They want more guns in the hands of people. That's why they supported this. I was at the school district when Sandy Hook happened. And I went to an elementary school in Tallahassee the day after, and I counted 20 little babies. And it broke my heart then, and it broke my heart after Pulse, and it broke my heart after Stoneman Douglas. And guess what? It's the students this time that are going to make the difference. And I know all three of us on this stage are going to be standing in solidarity supporting the students, because it's the students that are going to make change happen, and it must happen. And it must happen.
And Congresswoman, I just want to follow up with that. What types of weapons do you think should not be in the hands of the public?
Weapons of war, AR-15s and all their variants. Absolutely. I mean, any gun that fires off bullets in rapid succession, those are weapons of war. They're not made for any other purpose than to hunt people. And that's what they're being used for in our schools. We had another shooting yesterday in our school, and this has been going on. Most are not reported, like Sandy Hook and like Pulse and like Stoneman Douglas. But people are being killed every day by useless, senseless gun violence, and we have got to take those steps. I have found a statute that allows the governor on public safety grounds to ban the sale of military-style assault weapons. One of the first things I'm going to do as governor is issue an executive order banning the sale of military-style assault weapons. We're going to have universal background checks, and we're going to have mental health care. We're at the bottom. We're 50 out of 50 states for mental health care. We have got to provide that mental health care that will hopefully, it won't be for sure, but hopefully prevent the next Nicholas Cruz from occurring.
Mayor Gillum, excuse me.
Well, I'll align myself with the comments of my colleagues around the type of weapons and what we would do. But I also want to lift up the everyday gun violence that pervades neighborhoods and communities all across this state, and the fact that that is a tragedy, and that it deserves intercession. At the same level that we're having this conversation about mass shootings, which are horrible, and we ought to do everything to prevent them. But in communities, and I was just down in South Dade week before last, and they had a shooting in a neighborhood that left 7 people down, 4 of them dead, right? In a community neighborhood where any of us might live. And so we've got to also get to the root of some of these problems that are creating the conditions for that kind of pervasive gun violence to take place. We've got to make sure that our kids have access to jobs. We've got to make sure that those communities are not, again, perpetuating the cycle of poverty. We've got to make sure that we're creating the educational opportunities for these kids to get lift. Because what is absent in many of these places is a sense of hope and inspiration and aspiration that life can be better and I have something to live for. That's a more complicated public policy solution, but we've got to lean into that if we're going to disrupt the cycle of criminal perversion that right now we experience in far too many communities around this state.
Mr. Mayor, I want to stay with you for our next question, and this one is from the audience. It says, what are your plans for our military homeless? I'll expand that to say homeless in general. I know the homeless shelter used to be right there on the corner of Tennessee Street. What are your plans statewide to help so many aging Florida veterans that are here that are possibly homeless?
Well, first of all, to any veterans in the room, we thank you for your service. And you referenced the previous homeless shelter that we had in the city of Tallahassee, which was an overnight sheltering location. And what we have replaced it with is 100,000 times better. It is treating people for why they may be homeless. A lot of people fall into homeless for a whole range of reasons. Some of them mental health challenges, some of them economic challenges, some of them because they've lost a job or are in what you might say mental depression. And so we have created a full service center where, one, it is 24/7. You go in, you have to submit to treatment if you're diagnosed with the need for treatment. You've got to ensure that you're following the rules and sticking by the rules. And the way that we treat veterans in this system, and it's largely a federal program, is embarrassing. We need to make sure that we remove the scar tissue of mental health illness and get folks access. And one thing we can do very quickly is expand Medicaid to 1.5 million of the most medically needy people, because Medicaid is one of the best providers of mental health treatment that exists on earth, period.
Mr. King, housing, you could say, is your passion, it's your business. Sure. Tell me how you would fix the homeless problem in the state of Florida.
Sure. Well, the real reality we've learned in housing policy over the last 3 or 4 years is that the number one thing we have to do to better care for the needs of the homeless population before we can address all of the other needs that often present themselves is we have to create homes. We have to have houses. We have to have access to housing. And so when Tallahassee has raided that trust fund over the last 2 decades, it has created huge holes in our ability for cities and counties all across the state of Florida to provide homeless housing. You know, in our communities throughout Florida, we serve both veterans and we serve folks who have been prior homeless. They call them VASH, vouchers, and it is a huge need. We don't have near the supply to serve that community. And from a statewide perspective, I can tell you there is zero interest in Tallahassee in state government in addressing this. Zero interest and zero priority is put on it. It would be something that would be near and dear to me.
Congresswoman?
Can I specifically address the veteran issue? Because this is something that I'm passionate about and something I worked on in Congress, and it actually was the first event I ever went to as an announced candidate for Congress was what we call the Veterans Stand Down in Tallahassee, where they bring together homeless veterans and provide a whole range of support for them, from veterinary care if they have an animal to barbershops. And I'm proud to say my husband is there today. It's going on right now in Tallahassee today. My husband is there today serving our veterans. So homelessness is the root of the reason why many people can't even find that job, because if you don't have a home, you don't have a place where you can send information to or receive a paycheck at, if that's the way you still do it, the old-fashioned way. So we have got to be preventing homelessness by providing those jobs that our veterans deserve. And I will tell you, in Congress, I had a piece of legislation that went through, and I'm so proud of this, to provide information from the Veterans Affairs and Department of Defense to employers in the area so that they knew the skill sets that our veterans had. And it's with that connection, and it's not easy to get the Veterans Affairs and DOD to work together is a real challenge, but to be able to have them working together for the benefit of our veterans so that they can get a job and not have to be, hopefully not have to be homeless because they don't have a paycheck where they can afford somewhere to live.
Mayor Gillum, a question for you, and it's a little closer to my heart in regards to this question. I have a cousin here. He's the CEO of Quest, Inc. That's a local organization that helps the adult disabled find job placement. It helps people that may have suffered mental illness or injured in war, if it's a veteran, but from physical and mental disabilities. They help finding job placement. Every year they get more and more people that need that help from Quest, but every year they also battle the fact that they're getting more and more cuts out of Tallahassee. Where do you see that as a priority? Because it's not down the line of making revenue for the state.
Yeah. But it is down the line of the fact that we need to make sure that anyone who chooses to call the state of Florida home and wants to put themselves to work and to good use in this state, that we find use for everybody. And as mayor and as a city commissioner, we offer job opportunities to disabled. In fact, there's a point in the year, several times a year, where we bring individuals with either mental or physical disabilities into the workspace to show that they could do almost as good a job in any job as anybody else can do. That there may be physical restraints to the job that they can do, but largely there is great capacity to make contribution. And I think it's shameful when the state attacks resources going into those communities and directly to those constituencies. And as governor, it will be a hallmark of our administration to make use of everybody's talent in this state, regardless of their abilities and disabilities.
Congresswoman, what do you do for the adult disabled?
Well, as someone who's, I have a sister who works closely with those that have emotional challenges and physical challenges. It is really important that we make this an accessible state in every way so that anyone can find that job that gives them an opportunity to be out, working hard, being part of their communities, contributing back. And I'll say one thing, and this is a little bit off the subject, but we haven't talked a lot about those who aren't able to find jobs because they've had a conviction of a felony or something like that. And we have got to be making sure that we don't prevent people from having an opportunity to have that job. And that's something as governor that we're going to have an open employment market, not one that discriminates against someone who's fulfilled their debt to society and is rehabilitated and ready to be an active member of our community again. And that's something that we've got to do. And this is a humanitarian issue. I mean, when you're talking about the disabled, when you're talking about those who were previously incarcerated, this is about caring about each other and providing opportunities for each of us. And that is, as governor, what I will be committed to doing.
Mr. King, I got a question from the audience I want to read to you. It says, with compassion, treatment versus incarceration being shown for opioid users, what is the plan or solution that you offer to those addicted to other drugs?
Absolutely. So we have a major issue in the state of Florida around opioids, and we hear about it everywhere we go. And the great tragedy, right when Rick Scott got into office, he closed down the Office of Drug Control that provided a lot of resources in these fights. But one of the things that they also did in 2015 is they said no to Medicaid expansion. And someone said that was one of our greatest sources of revenue and support for those on substance abuse. It's actually the number one area of source and support. And we believe would be able to serve upwards of 300,000 people in the state of Florida who have these types of issues. I believe in compassion. This is an area where we've served, and we've got to do something so much better. And Medicaid expansion is the biggest idea on the table to dramatically fix it.
What we have to do is sue the big pharmaceutical companies and make them pay for what they've created, which is a crisis of addiction. We sued the tobacco companies and we won, and when I'm governor, we're going to sue big pharmaceutical so that we can make sure that we're providing, yes, absolutely, so that we have the resources for more private beds, for more public beds, and also something that is a real concern in addiction recovery is you can't treat everybody the same. You need to have treatment plans that are unique for the individual, and we're going to have the resources to address this issue. I spent a day with the firefighters not too long ago, and we went out on 2 calls. Neither one of them involved fires. Both of them involved overdose situations. So this is also a drain on our first responders as well, and it's up to the big pharmaceutical companies to give us the resources to deal with what they created.
Let me ask you this, Congresswoman. And you want to use a rebuttal?
No, I was just going to answer
just
the
give
question.
me 1 second. I think you got like 1 rebuttal left, maybe.
No rebuttal for me. I want to answer the question.
Congresswoman, I want to hit on this one really quickly, just because we talk about the opioid crisis, and it's a huge crisis that's affecting the state. But a lot of people here are old enough to remember when crack cocaine was a huge crisis that affected the state. And not saying that the people should be treated, worse because of how people were treated back then. But what do you do to rectify people that may not be addicted to opioids, but then wind up in the system that don't get thrown in an opioid recovery unit? They get thrown into jail. Yeah. Should there be a difference, and how do you fix that hole?
No, there shouldn't. And it's not just rectify it; it's recognize it, right? And I mean, we've seen the same thing with Parkland. I mean, there's so much gun violence that goes on, and yet Parkland was the one that really started the response and started more people, right? right? It doesn't. We got to be honest. Reality is, you see. So no, you don't. We need to recognize the difference in the inequality, and make sure that every Floridian, no matter what the color of his or her skin, is treated the same and treated equally. And I'm a people person, and I am someone that loves, and I love regardless of color of skin, of sexual orientation, of gender. And we need a whole lot more of that back in state government, because we've gotten so far away from caring about each other. And we're going to get back to that.
This isn't really a rebuttal to you. It's just to add to that. You know, when I'm going around the state of Florida, I also talk about the fact that we're in a criminal justice system where if my son is convicted of the same crime as Andrew's, his son is generally paying a sentence of 20, 25, 30% longer. We have to recognize that. I think the power in my story as I go around all across the state is that I am speaking truth to communities that are not aware of this, don't care about this, and have been unwilling to do anything about it. And so whether we're talking about the use of the death penalty, whether we're talking about private prisons, whether we're talking about judicial sentencing, whether we're talking about access to quality public defenders that are highly underfunded all across the state of Florida, our civil justice system and our criminal justice system is unevenly wielded across the state of Florida based on the color of your skin. So imagine if you had a governor that was willing to be able to talk about that with honesty and integrity.
Mayor Gillum, I want to stay on that crack cocaine debate versus opioids and what we've seen there. What do you see as the difference between a person addicted to crack versus a person addicted to opioids? And what do you see with the treatment that actually happens once those people are taken into custody?
Well, there is no difference between crack and cocaine other than the way it is ingested. And the fact that crack, predominantly utilized by people of color and poor people, you will find yourself, I believe, 10 times as likely to be jailed, criminalized for that offense over someone who uses cocaine, largely because it is a white-collar drug.
Well,
and we saw, and we're experiencing now, even in the response to how the society is dealing with the opioid crisis, and I don't want to compare the two in the sense that one is wrong and one is not. They both have to be addressed, and they're both issues. I would just happen to say that they both are public health crises, and they're not treated as public health crises, largely because of who the face of each of those epidemics are. And that's a problem. And so, in my opinion, and if I were governor of the great state of Florida, we would treat these kinds of addictions, whether it's crack addiction, whether it is addiction to opioid, as the public health crises that they are. And that means the same commission that you would stand up statewide to deal with opioids would also be the same commission you would stand up statewide to deal with the addictive drug abuse that exists all throughout communities of color and in poor communities throughout the state of Florida.
We have 5 minutes left, and I want to be able to get a lot of things in really quickly, including a closing statement. But I want to ask you guys at least one quick question just to finish up, and we'll start with you, Mr. King. If you had to pick between these two or Mr. Levine, who's not here today, who would be your lieutenant governor?
And I get the first question, right? That's a tough one.
Right here.
Right. Look, I will.
Switzerland.
Gwen is thinking how she's going to answer this question. Hold on one second.
You go
I would, I think there are incredible aspects about both Gwen and Andrew. And here's the true thing. We have spent the last year doing this all across the state of Florida. And we've, I think, while we have disagreements, if you watch the debate on Wednesday, you'll clearly see we had some disagreements. But each of them represent something, I think, very, very unusual and very exciting for Florida politics. So I would, to say to Andrew, he represents someone, I think, that speaks with a strength and a mastery around oratory that, to me, has made me a better candidate. And from the first moment I met him, I felt that. And Gwen comes from a legacy of service and a family that has done incredible things. Stuart, I would argue I'm going to watch to see what they do over the next 4 months, and then I would make the best decision.
Congresswoman?
Stuart, I will tell. It's a great question because each of us has an opportunity before August 28th to pick a lieutenant governor. I will tell you that I believe that the qualities of a lieutenant governor that I will be looking for is the ability to be truly my partner and truly someone that can help me govern this great state of Florida. So, and this may be seen as a bit of a cop-out, and I'm going to go there regardless, but either of these two wonderful men would meet that criteria.
Oh, good answer.
Mayor?
Well, one, I would hope that Chris would amend his statement to say not only oratory but substance on the trail. But I think to hit on the qualifications, I do think we may have a legislature that is in agreement with us, or we may have a legislature that we have to fight with from time to time. And I think I would look for a lieutenant governor who brings the ability to be a good and smooth negotiator on behalf of our administration and talking with and working with various members, all of the members, 120 in the House and 40 in the Senate, as a complete complement to our administration to advance progress in this state. And to be honest, I think each of my two opponents who are present possess the grace, the style, the competence, and the complement to the kind of administration I would like to. So
no one wants to pick.
No, it's a bad question.
Good try, though, Stuart. Good try. Good try.
The people want to know who you would pick.
Good try.
It's a horrible question.
The people want to know. I mean, we're going to put your feet to the fire because they don't want the other person to win and then they can't get on the ticket.
Awesome. We love our answers. We stand with our answers.
Well, you know. Well, Philip chose me, so he's not here to say that.
You should look for another job.
We're going to start with ladies first on closing statements.
I just want to thank everyone here so much. I mean, again, I think you can feel what we are on this stage. At the end of the day, we are friends. We have been on this campaign trail now for a year. Every day people say, what's it like to run for governor? I say it's joyfully challenging. But our commitment as candidates is to continue to have this conversation so you each get to know who and what we are. And I do know that any three of us, Philip's not here, so he doesn't get to talk. He doesn't get any right. But the three of us would be governors that would actually be able to fight for the people of Florida, unlike the one we have now and the one we've had for too many years, who are controlled by the special interests. And when I'm governor, the special interests are not going to have a voice. It's going to be the people of Florida whose voices are the ones that I listen to, and I'm going to be working hard for you every single day. Thank you all so very much. Thank you so very much.
Mr. Gillum?
Well, I've enjoyed the opportunity, obviously, to exchange ideas, and Gwen usually encompasses the love area, but I'm going to co-sign her in that space in the sense that we really do love and respect each other, or else we wouldn't be putting ourselves out here for public service in this way to the longest and the hardest scrutiny I've certainly ever had to endure up to this point in my life. That being said, it really is important that you all get to hear what we think, what we believe, and build up a level of trust around which one of us you can trust to stick by our word when we are elected, when we are in a position to make a decision, when we're pressed down on every side and we only have our conscience to lean on. It's important you get a sense of what that is and what that means for each and every one of us. We've got to win this election in November. Mm-hmm. And the votes that we need in order to win this November are largely people of color, young voters, poor voters, and a lot of crossover in between. I feel that I am most qualified to turn those voters out over anybody else running on the Democratic or the Republican side. So I'm going to run hard. I'm going to run well, largely because I know who loses when we lose these elections. Our kids, those 1 million folks that didn't get Medicaid, those folks who are being told they attend failure factories, the folks who don't get a second chance in this state because we're so punitive Those are the folks who lose when we lose these elections. So there are consequences here. I'm pleased to be a candidate for governor, and I hope that you'll consider me as you look forward to the August 28th ballot to become the Democratic nominee for governor of the great state of Florida. Thank you.
Home team always... Home team bats last, Mr. King.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming out to this conference. Thank you for having us. It's been a privilege to get to know so many of you over the last year, obviously to become friends and fellow competitors with Andrew and Gwen. They are tough, and this is it's a long, but it's an incredible journey to try to change the future of Florida. You know, I often believe that Democrats, we have ceded a lot of ground over the last 20 years in Florida around issues of values, around issues of faith, around issues of family. And, you know, as I've talked about the fact, I married my high school sweetheart. We have 3 small children. It pains me every time I have to leave them to go out on the campaign trail. But I argue the fact that, you know, progressives and Democrats, our family values, what makes us tick, what makes us different is standing up for families across this state that are under attack. You know, whether those are families that are paying 50% of their income in rent, and that makes a very difficult life, families that don't have access to health care, families that are dealing with substance abuse issues and don't have help, families that are falling through the cracks and don't have the wages to support their family. That's why I'm doing this. That's what I care about. That's what I would be fighting for if I'm your next governor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all so much.
A round of applause for all of our candidates. Also want to point out one other thing. Thank you so much for having me as your moderator. I try to get as most of the questions consolidated to the great questions that we can ask our candidates today. And I implore all of you, whichever one may be the winner, a lot of times these issues get brought up in front of a crowd that looks like this, but when that person gets elected, they sometimes forget about the crowd that got them there. So we implore you to remember the people that put you in that office. So thank you all.
Great job by Stuart Moore from NBC West, the NBC affiliate here in Central Florida, Channel 2. And what do you think? Leave your comments on if there's anything that is a yay or nay for you that you heard. What questions would you have asked? Anyway, that took place 2 weeks ago here in Orlando. The Democratic Black Caucus was here in town, and I was asked to come and videotape, and I did. Again, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. Just so happened that I guess I run in the circle of a lot of Democrats, and a lot of them are my friends. And I'm trying to think, in my circle, do I have any Republican friends? I think I do, here and there. But I never get that phone call, like I said, to say, hey, Charles, we have something over here. Would you come over and videotape this for us? But anyway, don't know if you learned anything. Don't know if you were persuaded yay or nay, but it's there, and you can always go watch it again. Again, I don't know what questions that you would have asked. But as I was saying earlier, that from what I understand, this is one of the most important elections that's coming up here in the history of our country. And I think it's very important that you, as well as myself, try to get as many people to understand how important it is that they register to vote and get out and vote. I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for. Just understand the power in the vote and understanding how important it is, you as a citizen of the United States, and for those who have sacrificed and died for the reason that you can go to the poll and vote something that we're still fighting for this very day. So with that being said, I'm Charles Morris here at the Journey 2020, where we come to you every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. right here at www.thejourney2020.com. Now, if you have any show ideas, if you would like to be on the show, would love to have you. You can always email us. You can send your comments as well, like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. We're on Twitter and Periscope. So each week we come your way right here. Happy that you are aboard. I'm asking you to please go out, register someone to vote. Please talk to them and let them understand how important it is. This is an important election coming up. And we will have more in the following weeks about this year's election. More people will be able to enlighten us, give us more information. And if you have questions, certainly you will be able to do that live on Facebook, coming up with some of my guests that's coming up. Looking forward to that. And I'm asking you to please, you be blessed. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'm Charles Morris here at the Journey 2020. You be blessed.